Script. Welcome to the Campaign Trend Podcast, where you're joining in on a conversation with the entrepreneurs, operatives, and experts who make professional politics happen. I'm your host, Eric Wilson. Our guest today is Lara Aulestia, founder and CEO of 1060 Advisors, a paid media strategy, planning, and buying company serving the public affairs and political industry. Lara has an extensive background in political media buying with past roles at companies that you've definitely heard of, like iHeartMedia, Resonate, Xandr, and Warner Media. In this episode, we're digging into the need to layer media buys across platforms to achieve our desired reach and frequency objectives. So, Lara, one of the big takeaways from the Center for Campaign Innovation's post-election survey is that when it comes to media, campaigns need a both-and approach. You need both your traditional linear TV, broadcast, cable, satellite, and it's more important than ever to incorporate streaming, both to get the audience reach you need and that message frequency. And so I'm curious to hear from you. How can advertisers ensure that they are buying the right combination of inventory across platforms, across mediums?
Yep, that's a great question, Eric. And one of the things that I will say before I even answer that question is that I have sort of a contrarian maybe approach to this, which is that everyone is talking about digital. Digital is superior. There's more people on digital platforms, more money going to digital platforms. I would say in this rise of, misinformation and AI generated content, that traditional is actually bubbling to the surface a little bit in terms of its importance in credibility and trust. And so that balance of the two together is becoming even more important now. Yeah. And so it's something that we always think about, but it's a critical piece in how we think about a strategy. And I would say the first thing that we really look for is who are we communicating to? Mm-hmm. Because that can change your strategy completely. I mean, based on age or income or even geographics. I mean, we've seen in some markets less than 20% penetration of streaming platforms, whereas other markets, there's over 90%. So that can really change how you're structuring your buy. And so it's the who, and then what's our outcome, and then from there, building out the layering of a strategy.
Right, and I think I would clarify here. You'll never hear me argue that we need to do only digital and no TV. I mean, I think one of the things that our data shows that you got to do both. To be able to get the reach. And so, totally agree with you on that take that it depends on the audience, depends on the market, who you're trying to reach. But the key thing is that, as you put it, layering all of this together and getting the right mix. It's not an either or calculation anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when it comes to streaming, we typically see campaigns buying just one or two platforms for streaming or CTV. But with that layering in mind on the streaming side, what do you advise kind of like the right mix of platforms?
1 to 2 can limit scale. Right? It's definitely maybe easier to execute if you just buy like a Hulu and YouTube and call it a day. But when you add in 3 to 5 or maybe even more, depending on the budget of a campaign, it can really help with your reach. Mm-hmm. And, mixing in a little bit of those premium AVODs, which is advertising video on demand platforms, with maybe a niche content hub. We used to have one called Crunchyroll, which is all anime. That maybe not for certain political campaigns, but good for certain consumer ones. But there's plenty of other niche content hubs as well. And then some of the aggregators, it just helps with the layering effect. I mean, we've seen consistently that from a reach and unique reach, as well as just an overall reach perspective, that when you add in more, it can really help expand your universe in this fragmented media environment.
Yeah. And that is that constant push-pull of, look, I've got to execute this campaign, but I've got to do the reach. I'm constantly surprised at how many streaming services people use. And when we ask this about voters, ask this about donors, and they use them all. I don't know where they find the time, but what that means is that they are splitting their time across. And so if you're fortunate enough to get an impression on, Hulu with them, you need to make sure that you're trying to get an impression for them on Paramount, right? So it does take that mix, and it sure seems like it's getting more difficult. It's almost like if you're having to buy cable without being able to purchase cable systems.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean the frequency the frequency capping is super important too, because the frequency can get out of control, especially because some of these streaming platforms have a lower ad load. So if you're really heavily going in on one platform with a lower ad load, and like you're just going to hit that audience so many times in the same place, that you need to diversify a little bit.
Right. I often see in campaigns, there's that battle between the premium versus long tail inventory. People get really strange about what we call fast, free and ad supported channels, things like your Roku or Tubi, and just lots of different things that I only know them because they're like installed as apps on my TV, but I don't know what they've got on them. But on one hand, if we trust the data and targeting, right, we are hitting the audience where they are, and an impression is an impression. But on the other hand, to your point, there is a desire to ensure that our ads are appearing alongside the highest quality content. And how do you balance that mix when you're building out a layered media plan?
Yeah, I think no doubt if you look at, let's say like a Fox News or a CNN or a major publisher, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, people are going to perceive that to be more credible, or just a higher quality compared to like a Pet Helpful, which you may never have heard of, but is like a long tail site with thousands of articles and a lot of ad clutter, right? And so there is a balance between the two, where if you've got too much ad clutter on one of these long tail sites, people aren't even going to see the ad and they're just going to get annoyed, right?
Yeah.
But you want to be able to reach your audience in some of these places that balances out the CPMs. So you might have a higher CPM on those more premium sites, but you're trying to, you're focused on a budget, and you need to reach as many people as you possibly can in your universe at a reasonable budget. And so there is a balance between incorporating premium and then adding in some of those like brand safety tools, like a double verify is one, an IAS is one, and they just help you with understanding fraud, ad clutter. Where do we want the ad to be served? Like looking at viewability. Is it likely to be viewed on the site when someone pulls it up on their browser? And so it's a little bit of a balance, and some campaigns may warrant only running on premium sites for whatever their strategy is. And then in other cases where you're trying to reach maybe a large part of the electorate and you're really focused on reach, as long as you have those important brand safety filters in, it may make sense to go on some of the longer tail sites.
Got it. So would another approach be sort of like, hey, we're going to go out and buy broad on some premium content, and then narrow on some of these kind of long tail or remnant inventory?
Yeah, I think in terms of like how you can structure those buys, you can definitely say, okay, if I have $100, just to use some easy math, and I want to put I want at least half of my budget to go to premium inventory, and you're in a programmatic platform, you can add in different, depending on which platform you use, you can add in different factors that will allow you to, if you can't deliver to that premium budget, it will automatically default to the next priority. And then if you can't deliver, and that next priority may be a longer list of sites that's not the elite, but still very good. And then your third waterfall strategy may be a much broader list. So there are ways of building it in as a waterfall so that you can reach both quality, premium, high profile, but still reach your audience across some other niche places that they go online.
So obviously, this would add some complexity to this, but I'm wondering, could you do the direct to publisher buy plus kind of your programmatic buy? Is that something that you
Yes.
see?
Yeah, so that absolutely. That would come into play. So, for example, we have a campaign running right now where we're doing homepage takeovers. We want a higher concentration of our rotational ads to run at a higher rotation on the site. And so in those cases, we 100% want to make sure we're on that one website. We want to have premium placements on that site. And so we are buying directly with that publisher to assure all of those things are in play. But then we have a broader strategy that is news specific, where we can run on other places and we may pull that website out. We don't want that in rotation because we're already doing a direct deal. And so yeah, it's a balance of the two for sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where people get so focused on the tactics and the execution of it that they don't take the time to step back and think about what the strategy is. So your strategy is you believe that the ad that is showing to your target universe is going to persuade them or build awareness or achieve some objective. Therefore, we might want to do some of that premium placement, but layer in the long tail inventory to get frequency, so they remember the message that they first noticed on New York Times or People or whatever the case may be. But if you just think about, oh, well, I want it to be on the best inventory, well, you're probably going to have a hard time getting that frequency. And if you just say, look, I really want to do frequency, it might not get noticed because, as you mentioned, some of these ad sites are pretty cluttered.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So I think the original sin, if you will, of digital advertising is that we promised it would be targeted precisely and eliminate waste from reaching the wrong audience in the way that TV advertising did. So I live in Northern Virginia. I cannot vote for candidates in the District of Columbia or Maryland. Yet I do see ads from those jurisdictions frequently. That's an issue with TV that we typically don't see with digital unless you're doing something very, very wrong. But how should campaigns think about the potential for overlap when they're layering media? So you gave the example of, like, maybe we're buying a Hulu and a Paramount and we're hitting the same person.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of mindset should we have in that case?
If you try to eliminate overlap completely, A, it's impossible. But B, it can definitely hurt you because like people are so like their media habits are so fragmented that it is very hard to build frequency on just one specific media outlet alone. Because people are getting their news and information in so many different places. To your point, they're like, oh, okay, I just watched White Lotus on HBO, and now I'm going to unsubscribe to that one. And then I'm going to like resubscribe to this other one because they're launching something else. And so it's really, you kind of have to have that layering. And I think of the precision and scale almost like a dimmer switch where like you can turn it down, you can turn it up. It's not like a binary thing where it's an either or. You have two situations. You can be a little bit fluid. I think you need precision for specific campaigns for specific reasons, right? And you need more reach and more overlap for other types of campaigns. And so it's a little bit of a I think overlap is important. However, there are situations, we had a TV buy that had a lot of connected TV partners on it, where we saw that two of the CTV partners had particularly unique reach, and two of the broadcast networks had a lot of overlap. And so we're like, okay, maybe we pull down a little bit over here and maybe we give a little bit more to the unique reach because that's going to help expand us overall. And so It's really a balance. I keep saying that, but it is true.
Yeah. You're listening to the Campaign Trend podcast. I'm speaking with Lara Aulestia, and we're talking about uh, media planning, layering, balancing your media buys. And I want to stay there for just a minute, which is that we have this desire to avoid waste and make sure that only the people we want to reach are seeing our ads. But I often think about people kind of sort of over applying the idea of audience targeting, and really what we're trying to do is cut down on waste, but we can't eliminate it completely because then we sacrifice frequency. And so I do think that some of our plans where it says here's the audience, here's the voter file that we want to target, and this is it. Well, you know, and our listeners should know that match rates are all over the place for some of this data. And so, let's say you have a 70% match rate on an audience with a provider. That means that 30% of your desired audience isn't going to be seeing your advertising. How should campaigns think about balancing that out?
I think with the consumer space, and when you're targeting, like for a brand, there's always a strategy of adding in additional data targeting, right? You have a consumer audience, and maybe they've purchased from you before, or they have likely intent, but you want to find people further up in the funnel. And I don't think it is a bad thing for a campaign to expand their audience beyond what just their voter file is. I think it's dependent on the message. Maybe there's a particularly polarizing message where there is a strategic reason why they really don't want someone to see that ad that is outside their universe. And so maybe in that case, there's a more general message, a more, friendly message for a bigger audience that could be utilized. But in order to really reach the full universe, you have to overlay some additional targeting strategies, or else you will miss those people. So I think it's, maybe a conversation, we don't do any creative, but that is something we might say back to someone's, is there an opportunity to expand this by tweaking or changing the creative somewhat?
And so I want to go back to this idea of layering in both your traditional and your streaming, and I think one of the challenges is how do you measure the reach across those platforms? So obviously we have our old friend, the gross rating point, which is still doing a lot of work, but or I guess it has a better reputation than what we're actually seeing. But that was always such a clear, like, okay, we're on these points, and we know what that means from market to market. We know what that means from whatever, cable system to broadcast, whatever. Where are we at getting something similar in the cross-platform space?
I mean, what people are using now is Summit to really understand like deduplicated reach, and just like cross-platform is using some of these tools like a Nielsen One or a Video Amp or a Samba. And so that's really helping you with that. In answer to the GRP, I mean, the model has completely shifted to impressions from the traditional brand space. You and
Are we
I
the only industry still buying points?
you and I were at that conference where I want to say, someone said they were buying like 2,000 GRPs a week. And that was simply like, because they were trying to put something in a bucket that just wasn't working, where if they had maybe diversified more CTV platforms and kind of got their mindset out of the GRP and into an impression model, it would have maybe been more effective. And so I think it's just because people know that metric that they've kind of stuck with it. They knew traditionally and historically it would move polling numbers, but the industry's really shifted to impression-based model, and then using some of these cross-platform measurement tools to understand your deduplicated reach.
Got it. And so these, I I take it these cross platform metrics can be somewhat pricey to access and don't come to us in the way that we know what the points are for a given TV show.
I guess cost is relative. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you're spending
Right.
the amount that you see being spent on some of these campaigns, I think it's definitely a relative cost that could be factored in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I disagree. I feel
Yeah.
like it could be, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about, how TV got so competitive where you could see what the other side was spending. We don't really have good competitive in digital cross platform yet. And, I think we also have to consider the fact that there's kind of a self-selection bias of, if you're a political junkie, you're watching the cable news stations, you're watching local news, so you're going to expose yourself to more sort of legacy advertising than maybe the average voter would.
Yes, that's right. And actually, lots of consistent research shows, like even in DC, that traditional news of all types, whether it's cable, broadcast, newspapers, newsletters, like all of that still is very highly consumed in DC compared to some other markets. So
That's
for
funny.
sure, just people that are more politically engaged.
Yeah. So one of the things that you touched on earlier was kind of the fraud detection, the brand safety. How can advertisers ensure that they're getting what they paid for with digital media?
I think a transparent relationship with whomever is you're working with from a buy perspective, really understanding what are the partners they're using, what are the inventory sources, what are the brand safety metrics they are putting into play. What is the frequency cap? If there needs to be an adjustment to the frequency cap, is that being communicated, and is that okay with the advertiser? What are the viewability standards? If we can't get our reach and we are requesting to lower viewability, is that going to hurt us? So just having some of those conversations about what we're spending, how we're spending, what the brand safety pieces are, and just a high level of communication and transparency across the conversation is really important.
Yeah. And our conversation has really been focused on video. We've sort of just taken that as implicit, and a lot of our political digital is focused on video. And again, that goes back to we buy what we know. We know that TV works, and we've got TV creative, and we invest a lot of money in that. So let's do that online. Where should we think about display and paid social and factoring that into our layered approach for media buying?
Mm-hmm. So, Eric, I think, well, social has a lot of video on it, but one of the challenges can be
Well,
that
they're not TV ads, right? Like
that's
it's
right,
different
that's right.
video. Yeah.
But and one of the challenges is the ads on video have lower completion rates, right? And so putting a static ad there in terms of the way that people scroll through their feeds with a strong call to action can help reinforce what is being said on video. So that layering effect that you were talking about earlier, that can be really helpful. Using, if there is a retargeting strategy in terms of trying to get someone to take some kind of call to action, display can be a much more effective way of utilizing that. And then it can just help with cost, right? Like just overall, your cost and in terms of the reach that you're trying to get and what is the cost per impression, it might be helpful there too.
Yeah. Well, my thanks to Lara Aulestia for a great conversation. You can learn more about her at her website. We'll put a link in the show notes and a link to her LinkedIn, where I'm sure she'd be excited to connect with you if you've got questions about media buying, media plans. If this episode made you a little bit smarter or gave you something to think about, all we ask is that you share it with a friend. It makes you look smarter in the process. More people hear about the show. It's a win-win all around. Remember to subscribe to the Campaign Trend podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. And you should visit our website at campaigntrend.com www.lara.com for even more articles and newsletters. With that, I'll say thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Lara.